Rome, 101 BC. The Bestias bridge over the Tiber River. A man kneels on cold stone, naked, shaking. He murdered his mother. Now he'll pay. The executioners drag forward a leather sack. It's not empty. Inside, 4 creatures writhe against each other: a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a viper. All alive, all terrified. They beat him first. Blood-red rods slam into his back until the skin tears open. Then they shove him into the sack with the animals. They sew it shut. He screams. The dog rips at his flesh. The monkey claws at his face. The snake strikes again and again, pumping venom into his body. And while he drowns in his own agony, they throw the sack into the river. Cicero explained why. Let him be denied sky, sun, water, and earth. Let the one who killed the woman who gave him life be stripped of everything that makes life possible. Each animal was chosen deliberately. The dog, shameless. The rooster, arrogant. The monkey, full of spite. The viper, pure hatred for his own blood. His body would never be buried. His soul would wander forever. This was Poena Cullei, the punishment of the sack. This is not fiction. It's in the 12 Tables, Rome's oldest law code from 450 BC. But the sack was just the beginning. Rome created 12 ways to destroy you: body, mind, and memory. Not the gladiators, not the Colosseum beasts. You already know those stories. Today, you'll see what Rome did outside the arena. The punishments for traitors, deserters, murderers, and corrupt priestesses. What your history teacher skipped, what Hollywood won't touch. I am Crown and Dagger. Here, there's no censorship, only the truth Rome buried. If you want history without the filter, hit like and subscribe now. Because what comes next makes the Colosseum look tame. Here's the question. Why did Rome invent torture this elaborate? Because death alone wasn't enough. Every punishment sent a message. The crime determined the torture. And the torture had to be unforgettable. The philosopher Seneca saw it firsthand. He wrote, "I come home more greedy, more cruel, more inhuman, because I have been among humans." This wasn't justice. This was control. Fear written in human flesh. Let's begin with how Rome executed those who betrayed her. From the top of a cliff in the heart of the city, where the screams of the falling echoed through the forum, where senators and citizens gathered alike. The Tarpeian Rock stood on the southern summit of the Capitoline Hill, rising roughly 80 feet above the jagged rocks below. It overlooked the Roman Forum, the beating heart of civic life, where senators debated and citizens assembled. For Romans, there was no more symbolic place to die. The rock was named after Tarpeia, a young woman who allegedly betrayed Rome to the Sabines during the city's earliest days. She agreed to open the gates in exchange for what the soldiers wore on their arms, meaning their golden bracelets. Instead, they crushed her beneath their shields, teaching Rome its first brutal lesson about the price of treachery. From that moment forward, the Tarpeian Rock became the designated execution site for traitors. The procedure was brutally simple. The condemned would be led to the cliff's edge while crowds gathered below to watch. Then, without ceremony, they were thrown from the precipice. Their bodies shattered on the rocks in full view of the Forum, a visceral reminder to every Roman citizen of what awaited those who betrayed the state. The historian Livy records that in 384 BC, Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, once a hero who had saved Rome from a Gallic invasion, was hurled from the rock after being accused of aspiring to kingship. His crime wasn't merely ambition, but betraying the republican values Rome held sacred. The symbolism was deliberate and devastating. Traitors were literally cast out from the center of Roman society. Their broken bodies left where citizens could see them, denied proper burial, and thus denied peace in the afterlife. Archaeological evidence suggests that the area below the cliff accumulated so many human remains over the centuries that it required periodic clearing. Emperor Claudius reportedly attended these executions personally, taking what Seneca described as perverse pleasure in examining how the bodies had landed. One witness recalled hearing him mutter, "See how the traitor falls," as another body struck the stones below. But the Tarpeian Rock was reserved for Roman citizens who betrayed their own. For slaves, foreigners, and the lowest criminals, Rome had devised something far more prolonged and agonizing. Crucifixion was so brutal that Roman citizens were legally exempt from it. This punishment was reserved for those Rome considered beneath human dignity: slaves, pirates, rebels, and enemies of the state. The condemned would first be stripped naked and scourged with whips embedded with bone and metal until their backs were unrecognizable. Then they were forced to carry the crossbeam called the patibulum through the streets to the execution site, collapsing under its weight while crowds jeered and spat upon them. At the site, executioners would drive iron nails through the wrists and feet, or sometimes bind the victim with ropes designed to prolong suffering. The cross was then raised, and the condemned was left to die. Death came slowly, usually from exhaustion and asphyxiation as the victim struggled to push upward to breathe. The process could take hours, sometimes days. Roman executioners developed specialized techniques to extend the agony, including a small seat called a sedile that prevented victims from suffocating too quickly. Seneca, who witnessed many crucifixions, wrote, "I see crosses there, not just of one kind, but made in many different ways. Some have their victims with head down to the ground. Some impale their private parts, others stretch out their arms." The most infamous mass crucifixion occurred in 71 BC after Spartacus's slave rebellion was crushed. The general Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered approximately 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Appian Way, the main road from Rome to Capua. For 200 kilometers, travelers passed thousands of dying men, their agony deliberately prolonged by skilled executioners. Plutarch recorded that the bodies remained on their crosses until they rotted away, a warning that persisted long after the screaming had stopped. The message was unmistakable. This is what becomes of those who raise arms against Rome. A Roman soldier passing by was heard saying to his companion, "Remember this sight. Remember what happens when slaves forget their place." While crucifixion punished external enemies, Rome had developed something equally terrifying for its own soldiers who failed in battle. And this punishment forced brothers to kill brothers. Decimation. The word itself comes from the Latin decimus, meaning to take a tenth, when a legion showed cowardice, mutiny, or catastrophic failure in battle. They faced collective punishment designed to maximize psychological devastation. The process was methodical and merciless. Soldiers would be divided into groups of 10, often men who had trained together, fought together, eaten together for years. Each group would draw lots, and the soldier who drew the shortest straw would be beaten to death by his 9 companions, not by executioners, by his own brothers in arms. They used clubs and stones, raining blows upon a man they had called friend, until his skull cracked and his body stopped twitching. The centurion Titus Pullo described it as a lesson written in blood that no soldier ever needed twice. The survivors faced additional humiliation. They were forced to camp outside the safety of the fortifications and subsist on barley instead of wheat, marking them as disgraced men unworthy of proper Roman rations. One of the most documented cases occurred in 71 BC, the same year as Spartacus's defeat, when a legion under Mummius engaged the rebels against orders and suffered defeat. Crassus revived this ancient punishment, which had fallen out of common use. 500 men died at the hands of their comrades that day, their screams echoing across the camp as a lesson to the remaining legions. The military writer Frontinus noted that units which had been decimated often became Rome's fiercest fighters in subsequent battles, desperate to redeem themselves and eliminate the stigma of their punishment. The poet Lucan captured the horror in his epic Pharsalia. Chance became the arbiter of doom, and on the hazard of the lot depended death. The psychological impact was so severe that some soldiers reportedly chose to end their own lives rather than participate in killing their comrades. Others formed blood bonds, pledging not to survive if one of their group drew the fatal lot, desperate attempts to preserve their humanity within an inherently dehumanizing system. But decimation, as terrible as it was, still offered 9 out of 10 soldiers survival. For individual military failures, Rome had devised something with no chance of escape. Fustuarium, the punishment of the clubs, awaited soldiers who abandoned their posts, lost their weapons, or showed individual cowardice in battle. The condemned soldier would be led before his assembled legion. Every man he had served beside was forced to witness what came next. The tribune would lightly touch him with a cudgel, a ceremonial gesture that served as the signal. Then every soldier fell upon him with clubs and stones. The military writer Vegetius noted that this punishment created such terror that facing the enemy in battle became less daunting than the certainty of death at the hands of one's own comrades. Polybius, writing in the 2nd century BC, described the aftermath. Even those who manage to escape are not saved thereby. They are not allowed to return to their homes, and none of their family would dare receive such a man in the house. The public nature was crucial. It forced soldiers to participate in the killing, making them complicit. After witnessing or delivering such brutality, they would never consider desertion themselves. A veteran was once overheard telling a new recruit, "You see that man? He ran once. His own tent mates beat him until there was nothing left to recognize. Don't run." Pause for a moment and consider what we've covered so far. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by the thousands, soldiers beating their brothers to death in decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in Fustuarium. And we're only 4 methods in. Which of these punishments do you find most disturbing? The randomness of decimation, the prolonged agony of crucifixion, or the symbolic horror of the Tarpeian Rock? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know where you draw the line, and we haven't even reached the arena yet. Damnatio ad Bestias, condemnation to the beasts, transformed execution into spectacular entertainment. This punishment was reserved for slaves, prisoners of war, and the worst criminals, those Rome deemed unworthy of a dignified death. The Colosseum's underground network, called the Hypogeum, contained 32 animal pens and 80 vertical shafts. Trapdoors allowed beasts and condemned prisoners to appear magically in the arena, creating theatrical entrances that heightened audience excitement. These executions were often staged as mythological reenactments. A criminal might be dressed as Orpheus and sent into the arena with a lyre, promised that his music might soothe the wild beasts. For a brief moment, the animals would seem calm. Then a bear would be released and maul him to death, creating a grotesque parody of the original myth. The poet Martial witnessed such spectacles and praised them in verse. What was mere fable when performed on stage becomes reality in our arena. During Emperor Trajan's celebration of his Dacian victories in 107 AD, games lasted 123 days. 11,000 animals were killed alongside thousands of condemned criminals and prisoners of war. Lions were starved for days before being released, driving them into a frenzy. Bears were goaded with hot irons until they became mindless with rage. The uncertainty of whether the beast would strike fast or toy with its prey kept the stands howling for more. The crowd cheered as men were torn apart. Vendors sold wine and snacks while children watched from their parents' shoulders. People placed bets on how long each victim would scream before dying. This was lunch entertainment. One spectator was recorded saying, "Did you see that? The lion played with him for nearly an hour before the kill. Best show I've seen all week." Equally theatrical, but perhaps more terrifying, was vivicombustio, burning alive. This punishment carried religious significance, as Romans believed fire purified the pollution of certain crimes. Emperor Nero elevated burning executions to performance art during his persecution of Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. His executioners would coat victims in wax or pitch to make them burn more slowly and brightly, extending their suffering while providing better illumination. Tacitus describes the scene in his annals. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as nightly illumination when daylight had expired. These human torches, as they came to be known, illuminated Nero's gardens while he drove his chariot among them, simultaneously playing the role of executioner, audience, and performer. The site of these burnings, Nero's gardens on Vatican Hill, ironically later became the location of St. Peter's Basilica, transforming a place of Christian martyrdom into Christianity's most sacred site. For crimes requiring spectacular destruction of the body, Rome employed pulveratio, death by crushing. Elephants trained to kill with agonizing precision became instruments of exotic punishment. Pliny the Elder described their capabilities. They can be taught to walk ropes, to throw missiles, and even to kill on command, crushing a man limb by limb as directed by their handler. This controlled destruction allowed executions to be prolonged for maximum entertainment value. The condemned would be forced to fight the beasts with minimal weapons before inevitably being crushed beneath feet that could exert thousands of pounds of pressure. During the Punic Wars, captured Carthaginian generals faced death beneath the very war elephants they had once commanded against Rome. Some prisoners were dressed in enemy armor, allowing the elephants, trained to attack specific colors in battle, to enact miniature recreations of Roman military victories. The writer Aelian recorded one execution that went spectacularly wrong. An elephant refused to kill a condemned man who had once been its keeper, trumpeting in protest instead. The crowd, moved by this display of animal loyalty, demanded the man's pardon. Emperor Claudius reluctantly granted it, demonstrating how even execution as entertainment could sometimes yield unexpected mercy. But for those Rome truly wanted to erase, physical death was insufficient. They needed to destroy something more fundamental: memory itself, Damnatio Memoriae. Condemnation of memory struck at what Romans feared more than death, oblivion. When the Senate decreed this punishment, it ordered the systematic erasure of the condemned from history. Statues would be destroyed or recarved with new faces. Names were chiseled from inscriptions. Wills were invalidated. Even mentioning the person's name could become illegal. The poet Horace captured Roman obsession with legacy when he wrote, "Non omnis moriar," I shall not wholly die, expressing hope that his works would survive him. Damnatio Memoriae sought to extinguish precisely this hope. Emperor Domitian suffered this fate after his assassination in 96 AD. The Senate ordered his statues destroyed or reworked. His name scratched from public monuments, his coins melted down. officials meticulously worked to remove all trace of his existence, as if he had never ruled Rome at all. Archaeological evidence of this erasure remains visible today. In the Roman Forum, inscriptions bearing Domitian's name show clear evidence of deliberate damage. The paradox is haunting. We know about these erased individuals precisely because the effort to remove them was so thorough that it became noteworthy. The conspicuous absence became a presence of its own. A senator was once heard whispering to a colleague, "His name is forbidden, but his ghost haunts every stone we chisel. We can't erase what we remember." Now we return to where we began, but with the full horror revealed. Poena Cullei, the punishment of the sack, was reserved almost exclusively for parricides, those who murdered their parents or close relatives. For Romans, this crime represented the ultimate betrayal of pietas, the sacred duty owed to one's family and ancestors. The ritual had ancient origins in the 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code. The condemned would first be beaten with blood-colored rods, then sewn into a leather sack alongside the 4 symbolic animals: the dog for shamelessness, the rooster for arrogance, the monkey for malice, and the viper for venomous hatred. This macabre ensemble would then be thrown into the Tiber River or the sea. The punishment denied the condemned contact with the fundamental elements of creation. No earth for burial, no air to breathe, no water to drink, symbolically removed from the sun's light upon being sealed in the sack. Cicero, arguing a famous parricide case, explained the philosophy. They want him unable to have sky, sun, water, or earth, so that he who killed the one who gave him life should be deprived of all, those things from which all living things derive their life. The punishment created a perverse new family for the condemned in death, trapped for eternity with beasts rather than the honored ancestors he had betrayed. While Poena Cullei emerged from Roman tradition, Scaphism represented a torture the Romans adopted from the Persians and modified to their purposes. It was reserved for crimes considered to place the entire community at risk: sacrilege against religious sites or betrayal of military secrets. The condemned would be stripped naked and fastened between 2 boats or hollowed logs with head, hands, and feet protruding. They would be force-fed milk and honey until developing severe diarrhea. Then their exposed skin would be coated with honey to attract insects. Left floating on a stagnant pond, unable to move, covered in their own excrement, the condemned would be slowly consumed by insects while still alive. Death could take weeks. The Roman historian Plutarch described the execution of a soldier named Mithridates by this method, noting he survived an astonishing 17 days before death finally claimed him. The mere threat of Scaphism was often enough. When Emperor Aurelian captured Queen Zenobia of Palmyra after her rebellion in 270 AD, he threatened her with this fate. The normally defiant queen immediately submitted to Roman authority, choosing comfortable exile over such horror. Fire has always held dual symbolism as both purifier and destroyer. Romans employed this duality in mors per ignem lentum, death by slow fire. Unlike simple burning at the stake, which could be mercifully quick, this punishment deliberately prolonged suffering through careful temperature control. The condemned might be placed in a bronze bull, suspended over low flames, gradually roasted on a metal grid, or partially immersed in boiling oil. In the Roman colony of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, in 157 AD, the Christian martyr Blandina was roasted on an iron chair over carefully controlled flames as part of public games. Witnesses recorded that she remained conscious and speaking throughout much of the ordeal. The jurist Ulpian classified death by fire as summum supplicium, the ultimate punishment, and recommended it particularly for arsonists, poisoners, and practitioners of magic. Perhaps most psychologically terrifying was the punishment reserved for Vestal virgins who broke their vows: live burial. The procedure was elaborate and deeply symbolic. The condemned priestess would be dressed in funeral attire and transported in a covered litter to the Campus Sceleratus, the field of transgression, near the Colline Gate. There she would be placed in a small underground chamber, provisioned with minimal food, water, a lamp, and a bed. The provision served an important legal fiction. Technically, Rome was not executing the Vestal, but creating conditions where she would die naturally, thereby avoiding divine pollution from directly harming a consecrated priestess. Once sealed in this chamber, the Vestal was left to choose between ending her own life quickly or enduring slow death by starvation in absolute darkness. The most famous victim was the chief Vestal Cornelia, condemned by Emperor Domitian in 91 AD, despite her protestations of innocence. As she was led to her living tomb, Pliny the Younger recorded she maintained perfect dignity, even when her dress caught on the ladder leading down to the chamber. When the executioner offered his hand, she recoiled as if from pollution, preserving her purity even in her final moments. She continued calling upon the gods, saying nothing more frequently than, "Caesar thinks I am unchaste. I, who have performed sacred rites while he triumphed and ruled." Archaeological excavations near the Colline Gate have uncovered small chambers consistent with historical descriptions, some containing remains of female skeletons alongside oil lamps and deteriorated food vessels. We have now witnessed 12 methods Rome perfected to punish, terrorize, and control. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by thousands along Roman roads, soldiers beating their brothers to death in Decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in Fustuarium, criminals torn apart by beasts for entertainment, heretics burned as human torches, enemies crushed beneath elephant feet, memories erased from history itself, parricides sewn into sacks with venomous animals, spies devoured alive by insects over weeks, victims roasted slowly over controlled flames, and sacred priestesses buried alive in darkness. Seneca the Younger once observed, "He who has made the infliction of punishment, his trade strives to find pleasure not in having punished, but in punishing." Perhaps in this reflection lies Rome's darkest truth, that these elaborate penalties served purposes beyond justice. Today, the Colosseum stands as a monument to human engineering. Tourists photograph its arches and marvel at its scale. They buy souvenirs and pose for pictures where 50,000 once screamed for blood. But walk through its tunnels at dusk, and you might hear echoes. Iron gates creaking open, beasts roaring in their cages, the shuffle of condemned feet on sand already stained brown from previous spectacles. 50,000 voices rising as one, while someone dies for their entertainment. The stone is easy to admire. Harder is remembering its purpose. Learned cruelty rehearsed until it felt normal. Rome's punishments weren't about blood. They were about control, shaping how citizens thought, feared, and obeyed. Every execution, every torture, every erasure served one end: to make power look eternal. That's the warning carved into the ruins. A civilization that glorifies violence eventually crumbles beneath its own applause. This is the story history books rarely tell, the real machinery of terror behind absolute power. If you believe truth should be told without censorship, subscribe to Crown and Dagger. I am Crown and Dagger. And this is what really happened. But Rome wasn't the only empire that perfected the art of human suffering. There's another civilization whose punishments made even Romans look merciful. Want me to tell that story? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, Drop a like so I know stories like this interest you. If this forgotten history moved you, subscribe. Every subscription helps us unearth the next buried truth and fight historical erasure. We refuse to let their voices fade into the dust.